Sure. I am an Alabama born and raised native. I've lived here my whole life. My experience in working for the town was in many capacities. So I bring a unique diversity of experience in my background, from the tax office to the town clerk's office, to a marriage officer, to deputy registrar of vital statistics, to most recently in the past year, an appointment unanimous to the planning board. So for me to run as a candidate, I have a lot of operational experience in how the town functions on a day-to-day basis, which I believe as a candidate brings a unique set of qualifications to running for office, because I've seen many times residents are impacted by the decisions the town board can make, will make in the future.
That's great. So, as you're looking ahead, if you're elected to the board, what things are most important to you to accomplish? What goals do you have?
One of my biggest goals is to keep, moving on, coming out of the pandemic. Guilderland has been growing in diversity. It has for years. I want to keep Guilderland within it's planned to be open and diverse to all. Coming back and is choosing to reestablish my life as a single mom, as a domestic violence survivor in Altamont, it was the community that helped me and my children thrive. So I want to keep Guilderland where we can be on track to allow lower socioeconomic backgrounds to come in, aging backgrounds to stay, to keep it so that we have a melting pot of residents in the town of Guilderland where people can happy, continue to live safely, and really enjoy the amenities that the town has provided over the many years. Another thing I want to see are more sidewalks. I know that sidewalks are a part of development. They're kind of that line until development happens. But sidewalks are very, very costly. At $225 a foot, they can be very expensive to the town. So the town has tried many different avenues through grants, through wrapping it through development to get these sidewalks implemented. I know specifically in the village of Altamont, I have been rallying for a sidewalk down club. Any of us that have walked down Gun Club know that is a very dangerous stretch of road when you're trying to traverse. So not only for my children's safety of going down that street, but all the families, whether it's bikers, joggers, runners, carriages, being pushed down, I want to see those residents safe. When I did the research to know that it's going to cost almost $1 million from Route 146 to the end of Gun Club where I live, I started thinking of different creative outputs that we could use in the town to make that happen, because I know it's very important for a lot of residents, whether you're in the village of Altamont or you're coming to one of our many functions that we have, like the village-wide garage sale. So sidewalks throughout the town are something that not only promote environmental friendliness, but they also promote health, to well-being, especially we all learned coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, and especially I would think with a park there on Gun Club Road, it would be lovely to have that connect to the village as well. Yeah.
And I know there was the SUNY study that the town did along with some SUNY students, graduate students, to bring about the connectivity throughout Guilderland. It was bike paths, trailways, sidewalks. And I know the COVID put a kibosh on that last year. It should have been moving along a little quicker, but due to COVID, they had, the whole program kind of came to a halt. But I know now that the town is looking to utilize that study to see if they can apply for grants in order to make some of these concepts become a reality. But it's all in due time, as we are all moving out of something that was, financially and mentally impactful.
Great. So now I'm going to launch into the issues questions. The first one, the topic is planning, and it's a two-part question, so listen carefully. Last year, 4 Westmere residents and a gas station owner sued both the town of Guilderland and Pyramid Management Group, successfully stopping the construction of a 222-unit apartment development on Rapp Road and a proposed Costco wholesale store. Should the town have appealed Supreme Court Judge Peter Lynch's decision or accepted the criticism in his decision, using it to recast the way the town's planning process works, how should the town proceed from here? And then the second related part is the town's master plan dates from 2001. There have also been neighborhood plans done between 2003 and 2016. Is Guilderland's comprehensive plan sufficiently up to date? And do the town board, planning board, and zoning board follow the master plans and neighborhood plans often enough?
Okay, so to speak to the first one, it's known that I'm on the planning board. I do believe that the town should do its due diligence in fighting the appeal to represent all. I understand the residents on West Terrace and their concerns, and I gladly would have listened to all their concerns. I do believe in listening to all sides. I'm not pro-development and I'm not anti-development. I'm for development that makes sense. I'm for development that includes the residents. I came into that part as later in the process because I was appointed in January of 2020. But I would love the opportunity, I would have loved the opportunity to sit down to hear their concerns, because I believe we could maybe come to different outcomes to some degree, because I understand a lot of the residents were angry and it comes from a place of passion. So I like to be positive instead of saying, what are you angry about? I'd like to say, what are you passionate about? Let's discuss how this planning is affecting you. How could we remedy the situation as far as the apartments that we're going in, as far as the costs go? So the town appealing it, I believe that not just the residents of West Terrace, but also for the entire town of Guilderland in its entirety should appeal it, because it was one judge's decision. And we'll see what the outcome of it will be at the end when it goes to the next level.
Great. And then the second part of that question had to do with the master plan and the different neighborhood plans that were developed after the master plan. And the idea is to see if you think they're being followed often enough.
Reminders, long question. So I believe the comprehensive plan, I know, was supposed to be revisited before COVID hit last year. So it did get put on pause, which I think was maybe the best decision, simply because residents couldn't be as involved as they wanted to be. You could still be through Zoom and whatnot, but I know residents really love a one-on-one, interface with the people that represent them. So going forward, I know that there's going to be a revisitation of the comprehensive plan, but I think a comprehensive plan is a living, breathing document. It has to change. And I think it should be revisited on a more continual basis, simply because we as a community are changing every day. Situations evolve. The pandemic made us all evolve in ways we never thought possible. But I think the revisitation of it on a more frequent basis would allow community members, maybe newer community members, older community members, to feel like they have some skin in the game, a stake in the race. And I think that's where a lot of people feel they're not represented or they don't have a voice, and because it's not revisited as often as it should be. Neighborhoods are always changing, and that's another thing that we could revisit. I believe in the idea of community action plans, where communities really take a greater sense of involvement in how development happens in their town. A lot of people, they don't know me and they never saw my views on what development was. They just made assumptions, and I think very much unfairly, because I love talking with people and seeing all sides of a story and being able to really on somebody's negative input or make judgments on positive input. But I think seeing both sides of a story really helps a person shape their views of things. Over the last year, I've certainly seen and heard a lot of stuff. And I think Guilderland needs a broad representation, a fresh set of eyes, to have these different community leaders involved, sit in on separate conversations. I know Beedle Improvement Association is a great association to sit in on. I've sat on a few meetings. And it's a great idea when a community can come together like that. And there's some small cultures. We know that living here in Altamont, that we are Altamont strong, Townville strong. All these communities are strong. And I think that's a really great opportunity for town and elected officials to come sit with these people and really hear on a one-on-one basis what these hopes and concerns are for. I don't think a broad brush approach is really the best sometimes, because every community is different. Every resident's wants and desires. Can we appease everybody? No, but we can make our darndest to try.
Great. So the next topic is police reform. To meet the governor's requirement for police reform in the wake of George Floyd's murder, a committee of 14 worked in 4 groups studying policies and training, response and diversion, criminal justice strategies, and racial justice and equity. They came up with 18 recommendations and 34 action items for the Guilderland Police Department. What are the best changes in the plan, and what further reforms are needed?
So I think I know that committee was made up of very educated individuals, and there was a very diverse community involved. And I think a lot of them really brought a lot of different perspective to the table. One of the things I think is one of the better approaches is to have some sort of social worker or counselor involved in some of these calls. I have friends in law enforcement, and I worry about residents' lives. I worry about officers' lives, no matter what capacity they're there. I think when you can go into a situation with a EDP, an emotionally disturbed person, and de-escalate it, through the pandemic, things like addiction, substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence were on a spike because we were all pushed to our breaking point. I think some of these situations could be de-escalated if somebody who was trained professionally could have talked down an individual that maybe felt they were at the end of their rope. Maybe somebody, called because they were afraid of, a suicidal person, or maybe a homicidal situation. But when an officer who may not be completely trained in mental health background walks into a situation and it's rushed on adrenaline sometimes, maybe bad outcomes can happen. But with involvement of somebody on a social worker level, I think that could help de-escalate these situations faster. I think, even one of the great things I loved about it too was the officer development, and like a professional development, like a continuing education. These men and women, and and the canines too, everybody who serves us need to have a venting point. They need to decompress. These men and women go through tremendous situations of stress, and sometimes they don't have a way to deal with them. I think a great to be able to check in, a smart assessment of how they're feeling, how they're doing, and having an outlet that they don't feel they're being judged or criticized through is another way to keep the police force within the community. How sometimes people say, keep them in check. I don't think it's a negative thing to say, that situation was really stressful. I think that would, in the culture that we live in right now, it's very difficult. We've come out of the last year with George Floyd and so many of the other tragic situations that we've all lived through with race and inequality, that if an officer walks in and knows how to respond without lethal force, lethal force, if necessary, has become one of the questions, a hot button. I think educating not only the officers, but also community-led involvement. To say, hey, I feel in this area, we maybe have some racial profiling. I believe Guilderland Police Department has taken a lot of leaps and strides and taken a real hard look at itself in many ways. And I think with the idea of having the community involved, you just have the officers who are employed by the town, but you have individuals that are help, pay through taxes for these officers to be on board. We need to make sure the community feels safe, but we also need to make sure officers feel safe. At the end of the day, we're all still human beings. And I think some of the initiatives really protect the residents and also protect these officers as well. We're trying many times to do their job.
Excellent. So the next topic is environment. The 2 landfills in Albany County will soon be filled. Guilderland has helped reduce waste by chipping up yard refuse to make usable mulch. Should the town start curbside pickup of food scraps or start a compost center? And what further measures should Guilderland take to help the environment?
Okay, Melissa, this is one of my favorite issues at hand as far as saving the environment. I'm very big reduce, reuse, recycle. I'm a very avid organic gardener myself. I use my food scraps. There is no waste policy in my house through the entire year. We have a compost pile in the corner of the garden, and I think that for community garden, it's a great idea. We have one in the town of Guilderland at Towasantha Park, over by the Towasantha Park. But I would love to see community gardens in Hunter, in McCowanville, and other spaces of town where permitted it could happen. Because I believe if you have a community garden, they do so many great things. They bring community together. They help food insecurity. They really help kids learn sustainability from a very young age. And that's what I think as adults and parents, we need to teach our children is no waste, restore earth. I would love to see Guilderland have like a curbside food scrap pickup. The only kind of an issue, because trust me, they love their food scraps. But if we could figure out a way to start a compost center, I think it's a really great way to show people that Guilderland cares about the environment. Guilderland has tried to make great strides in its green green space awareness, environment friendly awareness, changing to LED lights throughout wherever they can. Those things cost money, but I would be rest assured that there are grants out there that the town could look into to make some of these things happen. Because if you can kill two birds with one stone, save the environment, but also help those in our community that are maybe struggling, or how about teaching a younger generation through an older generation of how to be sustainable, how to take care of yourself. And, when we can incorporate our elderly or aging population that maybe have love of gardening, that feel isolated and alone, now we can have them interact with younger school age children that they would feel passionate about joys of gardening with. It really helps the community come together on so many levels. I have so many gardening tips. It's all organic, no pesticides, no all natural fertilizer that, hey, if the voters want to stop by my house, I'll absolutely give them any tips, any zucchini, any yellow squash, because usually people run from me with those. But I really think Guilderland's on great strides, and that's something as a board member, I would love to look into. It's a passion of mine, and I think it could really help the community in so many ways.
Excellent. So the last topic is revaluation. In 2019, after 12 years of not going through a town-wide revaluation, Guilderland did so. After the process was completed, Supervisor Peter Barber said, this is a quote, "The goal was ultimately to more fairly and equitably spread the tax burden so residential property owners wouldn't be subsidizing commercial. We did that." End quote. Since then, the town board has agreed to reduce the assessments for a number of Guilderland's roughly 400 commercial properties. Which property owners in town are paying their fair share, and how often should the town go through revaluation?
I know firsthand working in the tax office, right next door to the assessor's office, reevaluations are very time consuming and very, 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 very expensive. So as far as the revaluations, you're talking upwards of $1 million+ for a revaluation. So we want to make sure that it's done at the right time and not too often. I think too often doesn't give a clearer picture. You're talking to somebody whose reevaluation assessment went up a 47% increase change. My assessment on my house went up $77,000. Do I think it's fair? Yes, I do. Because I know right now, if I were to try to sell my house in this market, I could get the price that it was assessed at plus more. I think because of that lack of time of reassessment, it seemed like a walloping impact instead of a slow measured impact. Perhaps maybe every 7 years. You want to make sure that the community is stabilized enough to have a reevaluation done and not have, as growth starts to slow, that's where we get a stabilized tax base. So I think the town not doing it for so long create a situation where it seems so dramatic. I think everybody has the right to contest an assessment. I think people would be not doing due diligence if they felt it was unfair, whether you're a commercial property or a residential property. I think that's something that a lot of people just assume the commercial properties, they're fighting their assessment again, but it's the same thing with homeowners. I know people I've seen over the years who always, maybe on a more regular basis contest their assessment. And I think within their rights, just as within the commercial properties rights, are they always granted or awarded the reduction? They're not. They try to come to an established, negotiation. Yes, there's third-party arbitrators involved. So I think the process becomes fair because it's not just the town that decides it or the town employees that decide it, but there's a broader scope of knowledge. It's a very lengthy process. It's not just a one and done. And I think it really does, at times, try to give as clear a picture of a true assessment as possible. It's all a process, and that's what I always tell people. The process may seem long and arduous, but it's definitely worth the fight. And I think that's something that the town believed it balanced itself out with the reeval. And I think it was, in many respects, true and correct to as best as it could be. And I don't believe that they'll wait that long the next time around, and nor do I think they should. I think simply you want to make sure, and maybe that's part of the comprehensive plan that we work into, is that something that we build in. When do these community, the townwide reassessments happen? How often and frequent? I think if residents understood the cost and the work hours, the manpower behind it involved, maybe we could come to a general consensus on what is, an appropriate length of time to go between these reassessments. And where people have a negative view of it, I try to take a positive view and know that I could absolutely, what my house is assessed for now, get that. So I think if I had stayed at the old assessment, it made it a little tricky to get what I know this house, if I ever tried to sell in Altamont, would be worth. And I think there were people that didn't have their assessment moved because they know at this stage, their house is valued at what it is. But there was different pockets within town that these revals impacted. And I know a lot of people thought it was unfair. And as I worked in the tax office, I would say, well, here's the problem with this is that you can fight the reduction or fight the assessment and ask for a reduction. And that'll reduce your assessed value. To resell your house and you want to get what you truly would know it's worth, it makes it a little tricky to try to get that extra money because you at one point said, my house isn't worth this much. And then you turn around maybe years later, try to sell it for what you know it is worth that much. And so I think, residents take that time. And I know they go through an educational process in learning how to grieve assessments. I know the Guilderland Public Library had done courses on that, kind of like a little community course and how to grieve your assessment. Again, people that are happy, they don't bother grieving. People that choose to grieve, I think, are doing their due diligence. And I applaud them for the town has really tried to keep everything in check as best it can.
Excellent. So that completes the issues questions I had, but I'm sure there are things that you want to let people know about yourself or your views, and I'd just like to hear for your closing thoughts, whatever it is that's most important for voters to know about you.
Sure, Melissa. So running as a first-time candidate, it's definitely been an experience. I've had a lifelong love of giving back in public service. That's really what drew me to run for office. When I left the work with the town of Guilderland, it was a hard choice for me because I loved working with the residents. I loved helping the residents in every way possible. I mean, some of my best moments were working in the tax office and being able to help a resident maybe find an exemption that they could apply for and help reduce their tax burden, or some of the marriage ceremonies that I performed. I performed same-sex marriage ceremonies, and they were some of the most beautiful, touching stories. And it kept hitting home to me that I know I'm doing the right thing by giving back. My heart is in this. My heart has been in this. It wasn't an easy process for a middle-class woman like me. I'm a mom and step with 5 boys. I've raised them all here in the village of Altamont. I've always given back. I love the library, and I've sat on the library board of trustees for the last 3 years and the vice president for the last 2. I've always tried to give back to the community through whether it was donating my time to the Guilderland Chamber of Commerce, to supporting the Guilderland Public Library, to community caregivers. I've always flown under the radar with my involvement in certain charitable organizations because I never felt that I had to have a toot soapbox to say how fantastic my time and donations were. I just like to quietly go in. Couldn't leave the place that I was just at better than it was before. I think with me being in Altamont is my blood. Just as many residents in this town feel that their community is in their blood if they were born and raised here. I really want Guilderland to continue to thrive out of this pandemic. And for me to say, okay, Amanda, you can do this and run for office, it was a scary process. But I've learned and grown so much throughout the last about 4 months of my life that I know I'm making the right decision. And every door I'm knocking on, every person I talk to knows my heart is so in this. I'm in it for all the right reasons. And I really feel that, whether people love me or hate me, they're going to see my views as something like, I could work with that woman. I may not agree with her, but she's willing to listen to me and I'm willing to work with her. And I think we could continue to make Guilderland the great place it is to live, to work, to raise a family. That's what matters to me the most. Being involved in the community and knowing that I'm making a difference, it's very, very important to me. The community growing up here in Altamont was amazing to my family. I was one of 9 kids, work-class family, mother, stay-home mom, and we worked within the budget of a 1-income household. So a lot of the times the community was very charitable to my family. And that means the world to me because it showed me even back as a child, Guilderland cares, Altamont cares. And I think to be a product of that, and to say, I care about these residents. I know, there's people out there that want change. I'm also a force for change, whether they believe so or not, is, again, my chance and opportunity to earn their vote at the door.